The branch director's face went completely white. His hands trembled as he reached for the phone on his desk, and I watched him exchange a look with the woman beside him, the company attorney, that made my stomach drop through the floor. They had brought me into this private conference room 20 minutes ago. Now, they looked like they were about to call the police. "Miss Lawson," the director said, his voice careful and controlled, "I need you to understand the seriousness of what I am about to tell you. This policy is active. The claim value is approximately $3,600,000. I could not breathe. I could not think. $3,600,000 from an insurance policy my sister had thrown in the trash 3 days ago. But there is a problem," he continued. "Someone has been trying to steal it from you for the past 3 years." He placed a folder on the table between us, opened it, and pointed to a signature line on a form that had been rejected and stamped in red ink. "Do you recognize this name? Katherine Lawson, my sister. My own sister. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community." I sat there, staring at the red ink, but I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. In my world, the world of climate-controlled archives and centuries-old ledgers, emotions are just noise. Data is what matters. And the data in front of me was screaming a story of betrayal that I had been too sensible to see. The director, a man whose nameplate read Thomas Richardson, was still watching me. He expected a breakdown. He expected me to fall apart at the mention of $3.6 million. He didn't know that for 33 years, I had been the silent investor in my family's version of reality, always footing the bill for their delusions, while I sat in the shadows. My sister Katherine had called this policy a stack of mouldy scrap paper. She had laughed a sharp, practiced sound meant for her 300,000 followers as she tossed it into a funeral reception trash can, right next to a half-eaten shrimp cocktail. She told me to stop being a hoarder and focus on the future. Turns out, the future was written in the very fine print she was too arrogant to read. I am Olivia Lawson, and I am a professional archivist. My job is to find the truth buried under layers of dust and neglect. I spent my life being invisible, the other daughter who read the contracts, while my sister took the stage. My family thought my obsession with details was a mental illness. They called me paranoid. They called me difficult. I call it accounting. And today, the balance sheet was finally being settled. I looked at the attorney, Eleanor Wells. She was a world away from the fog-drenched streets of San Francisco outside. She looked like she was made of cold iron and expensive wool. "You said someone tried to modify this 7 times. I said, my voice as clinical as a forensic audit. "Show me the dates." Richardson hesitated, then slid the second folder toward me. I didn't just see signatures. I saw a timeline of calculated theft. Each attempt was a line of credit my sister thought she could open against my life. My mother's name was there too, signed as a witness to the fraud. I felt a cold clarity settle into my bones. This wasn't a family tragedy. It was a hostile takeover. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought because I didn't demand the spotlight, I didn't see when they dimmed the lights on me. But being invisible is a superpower. You learn to watch the people who think they aren't being watched. I saw Katherine's eyes at the funeral calculating the value of the silver, the equity in the house, the cost of the wine. She thought she had erased me from the narrative. But my grandmother, Laura, was a librarian before she was a millionaire. She knew that the most important stories are often hidden in the margins. She left me a paper trail that led straight to this room, and she knew I was the only one who would follow it to the end. The director's phone finally connected to the legal department. I watched his reflection in the glass window, the San Francisco mist blurring the edges of the city behind him. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. And maybe he had. He had seen the ghost of a woman who spent 3 years protecting her granddaughter from her own blood. I leaned back in the leather chair, feeling the weight of the silver book pendant around my neck, the one my grandmother gave me, because I looked for what was true. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a reckoning. "We're going to need copies of everything," I told the attorney, "including the rejected forms. Especially those." I wasn't just claiming an insurance policy. I was beginning a forensic audit of every lie they had ever told me. But every audit has a starting point. a moment where the first discrepancy is found. For me, that moment was exactly 3 days ago, standing in the cold fog of my grandmother's funeral. The air in the San Francisco funeral home was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the cold, damp fog rolling in from the bay. My mother, Patricia, looked impeccable in her designer black suit, her eyes dry and her posture perfect. She wasn't mourning a mother. She was managing an event. Beside her, my sister Katherine was putting on a show that would have made a professional actress envious. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her other hand firmly gripping her phone to record a vulnerability moment for her 300,000 followers. In their world, grief was just another piece of content to be monetized. I stood in the back, a shadow in the corner of my own family's life, the way I had been for 33 years. To them, I was Olivia, the boring librarian, the daughter who was as exciting as an unindexed archive. After the service, we gathered at Grandmother Laura's estate. Katherine was already moving through the study like a looter in a silk blouse. She found Laura's old, leather-bound catalogue ledger, the one that held the inventory of every rare book and historical document my grandmother had protected for decades. Katherine didn't see history. She saw clutter. "Look at this mouldy scrap paper," she sneered, tossing the heavy ledger into a black plastic trash bag. "Grandma was such a hoarder at the end. We need to clear this junk out so I can film my house tour." I watched that book hit the bottom of the bag, but I didn't move. I didn't shout. This was the invisible chain of the survivor. Growing up in that house, I had learned that my voice had zero market value. I had been parentified early, trained to be useful rather than loved, keeping the peace so Katherine could have the floor. I lived in a prison without bars, where my existence was a clerical error they were forced to acknowledge. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was calculating. I knew that in this family, compassion was a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and I was finally closing the account. I waited until they were in the kitchen, arguing over which of Laura's antique teacups would look best on Katherine's livestream. I walked to the trash bag. My hands were steady as I reached past discarded funeral programs and half-empty bottles of water. I pulled the ledger out. It was cold and smelled like old paper and lemon polish, the only scent that had ever meant safety to me. I tucked it into my bag, feeling the weight of the silver key I knew was hidden inside the spine of the book. They didn't even look up as I walked toward the door. Olivia is always so sensible," my mother said to Katherine, not even bothering to get my name right. "She knows her place. She knows she wasn't left anything important." Yes, I knew my place. I was a professional archivist. And archivists know that the most valuable assets are never the ones on display. They are the ones hidden in the margins, waiting for someone with the patience to find them. Katherine thought she had thrown away a book of lists. She didn't realize she had just handed me the evidence of a $3,600,000 theft. I locked the door of my private archive lab at the library, the sterile air smelling of ozone and preservation chemicals. In here, everything has a place. Every document is handled with white cotton gloves. Every truth is verifiable under a magnifying lamp. I didn't reach for a glass of wine to numb the day. I reached for a microspatula and a high-resolution scanner. My family thought I was a hoarder of junk, but they didn't realize I was an expert in the language of the forgotten. I placed Grandmother Laura's ledger on the velvet-lined table. To the untrained eye, it was just a list of books. To me, it was a map. I ran my fingers along the leather binding, feeling the slight, unnatural bulge in the spine. With the precision of a surgeon, I eased a thin brass key out from a hidden pocket in the spine. It was small, worn, and heavy, with the weight of things left unsaid. Beside the key, I found a series of notes written in a script so small it required 10 times magnification. Laura had used a cipher, the same one she taught me when I was 12 years old, back when she told me that the loudest people usually have the least to say. I translated the margins of the inventory list, word by word. Account number ending in 4402. Restricted access. Trust established 1998. As I cross-referenced the account number with my own digital records, a different kind of fog began to lift. For 15 years, my mother, Patricia, had reminded me every time I bought a textbook that my education was a drain on the family resources. She claimed she had sacrificed her own retirement to keep me in school. But the ledger told a different story, a documented, undeniable story. The anonymous archivist scholarship that had covered my tuition, my room, and my specialized training wasn't from a stranger. It was from Laura. She had channeled $500,000 into a restricted trust, specifically for my development, while my mother and Katherine were busy treating my life like a bad investment. I wasn't a financial burden. I was a prepaid asset. I sat back in the ergonomic chair, the blue light of the monitor reflecting off my glasses. My compassion for them had been a luxury they had overdrafted for decades. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon the sensible regret my mother expected. But there was only clarity. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a forensic audit of 30 years of emotional embezzlement. Grandmother Laura didn't leave the ledger in the trash because she was confused. She left it there as a test. She knew Katherine would see junk, where I would see a paper trail. I opened my laptop and began drafting a formal request for a complete financial history of the 1998 trust. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to file the paperwork. I watched my phone screen as Katherine's face filled the frame, illuminated by a professional ring light she had set up in Grandmother Laura's historic study. She was live broadcasting the estate, reimagining to her 300,000 followers. In the background, our mother, Patricia, was already marking antique furniture with neon green tape, a colour that looked like a toxic leak in that room of mahogany and leather. Katherine picked up a first edition volume from the shelf, fanning the pages carelessly to show the camera. "Can you believe Grandma kept all this stuff?" she asked, with a high-pitched laugh that felt like glass shards in my ears. "It's so musty. We're going to gut this whole room and turn it into a walk-in shoe gallery. It's about time this house had some actual market value." My sister turned the camera toward Grandmother's empty velvet chair. "And then there's my sister, Olivia," she continued, her voice dripping with the fake sympathy she used to generate engagement. "She actually tried to save a trash bag full of mouldy catalogues at the funeral. Talk about living in the past. But I guess when you have zero social presence, you have to cling to something." In the comments, the heart icons and laughing emojis scrolled past like a digital firing squad. My mother entered the frame, dabbing her forehead with a silk scarf. "Olivia has always been difficult," Patricia told the audience, her tone clinical and dismissive. "She lacks the vision to see that we are finally moving forward. She's lucky Katherine and I are here to handle the real business of the family." I leaned back in my library chair, the blue light of the monitor reflecting off my glasses as I watched them perform their triumph. They were intoxicated by an illusion, the illusion of power that comes from a wallet they hadn't even opened yet. I realized then that their authority was a subscription service they were paying for with money they didn't legally own. Katherine and Patricia were suffering from a terminal case of rented power. They acted like owners of the world, but their entire existence was a house of cards built on Grandmother's silence. They weren't shocked by my insulting choice to save the ledger. They were shocked that I had finally stopped being a passive asset in their family portfolio. Katherine picked up a framed photo of Laura and me, the only one in the house where I was actually smiling. "Total clutter," she whispered to the camera, placing it face down on the desk. My mother nodded, already calculating the commission for the estate sale. They thought they were winning because they held the keys to the front door. They didn't realize I held the keys to the $3,600,000 vault beneath their feet. I didn't type a rebuttal in the chat. I didn't call to beg for the books. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was a balance sheet. I simply opened my folder of verified documents and added a screenshot of the live stream to the character and intent evidence file. Inside me, a different kind of fog was lifting. I was no longer the other daughter waiting for a seat at their table. I was the forensic auditor of their downfall. Katherine continued to laugh for her followers, unaware that her digital footprint was becoming a trail of breadcrumbs for the district attorney. This wasn't revenge. It was the natural course of a long overdue debt, finally reaching its maturity date. I walked back into the private conference room at the insurance office, the soles of my shoes clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of an incoming judgment. Richardson, the director, was off the phone now, his face still the colour of unprinted vellum. Beside him, Eleanor Wells sat with a stack of files that represented my sister's criminal ambition. My family had spent years calling me the detail queen, like it was a joke. They thought my obsession with verifying facts and checking fine print was a sign of a small mind. They were about to learn that in a world of $3,600,000 liabilities, the person who reads the fine print is the person who owns the room. I didn't wait for them to speak. I opened my own professional case file, the one I had spent the last 48 hours building in the silence of the library archives. I slid a high-resolution scan across the mahogany table. It was a comparison chart of the 7 signatures Katherine had attempted to pass off as grandmother Laura's. Under my library's forensic magnifying software, the inconsistencies weren't just visible. They were screaming. The slant on the 1998 trust modification is off by 12 degrees, I said, my voice as flat as a ledger entry. The pressure on the insurance change request from 2 years ago is inconsistent with grandmother's arthritic grip. And then there's the notary stamp. I paused, watching Richardson lean forward. Gerald Vance, the notary my sister used, had his license revoked last month for fraud. Katherine didn't just try to steal a policy. She attempted to corrupt a public record. The director looked at the attorney, then back at me. Miss Lawson, our legal department, has verified the lock your grandmother placed on the policy 14 months before she passed, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The attempts to change the beneficiary to Katherine were flagged internally, but we were waiting for a claim to be filed to initiate a criminal referral. I asked Richardson why they hadn't simply called my grandmother to confirm. His face tightened. We tried, Miss Lawson. 7 times. But your mother, Patricia, had filed a power of attorney for healthcare and finance, claiming your grandmother was too mentally frail to handle phone calls. She intercepted every verification letter and rerouted our calls to her own device. It was a calculated isolation legal elder abuse designed to keep Laura silenced while they picked her pockets. I leaned back, a cold clarity settling into my bones. Then let's stop waiting. I am here to officially file the claim as the sole verified beneficiary of the $3,600,000 policy. I looked at the attorney, and I've already instructed my own legal counsel to begin the process of freezing the $500,000 trust account my mother, Patricia, has been using as a personal travel fund for Katherine. They thought I was the boring sister because I didn't live stream my life. They thought because I sat in the back of the room, I didn't see the theft happening in the front. But being invisible means you have a front row seat to the truth. Richardson reached for a set of official documents, his hands finally steadying. The claim is initiated, Miss Lawson, and the criminal report for attempted insurance fraud and forgery is being transmitted to the prosecutor's office as we speak. Katherine was probably still live on social media, showing off grandmother's antiques to her followers. She was busy performing a life she couldn't afford, while I was busy auditing her right out of existence. This wasn't revenge. It was a long overdue reconciliation of accounts. The attorney, Eleanor Wells, pulled a final document from the bottom of the stack, her expression turning from professional to almost reverent. There is one more thing your grandmother did. Miss Lawson, she whispered. The $500,000 trust fund wasn't just a gift. It was a tripwire. Grandmother Laura had established a living trust managed by an independent law firm, not just a bank's automated server. She knew a computer could be ignored, but a trustee with a legal mandate could not. The moment that 7th attempt was flagged as a fraudulent mismatch, the law firm was notified. As the primary trustees, they didn't just flag the account, they immediately filed a formal criminal referral for elder financial abuse with the district attorney. My grandmother, the librarian who understood the weight of every comma, had installed a legal dead man's switch. The 1998 trust was coded with a specific notification protocol. The moment my mother, Patricia, used a forged signature to withdraw more than $50,000 for Katherine's lavish lifestyle, a high-priority alert was automatically transmitted to the county prosecutor's office. Katherine and Patricia hadn't just been stealing. They'd been self-reporting their own crimes for 3 years without even knowing it. I didn't feel pity. I felt the satisfying click of a lock falling into place. This wasn't a family dispute. It was a criminal conviction, 3 decades in the making. Suddenly, my phone vibrated on the table. It wasn't a text. It was a call from Katherine. I put it on speaker. The sound of her voice was unrecognizable, no practiced influencer lilt, no high-pitched giggle for her followers. It was raw, frantic, and ugly. Olivia, what did you do? She shrieked. The bank just froze everything. All my accounts. My credit cards were declined at the boutique. Behind her, I could hear my mother, Patricia, hyperventilating. We just got a knock at the door, Olivia, Katherine sobbed, her arrogance replaced by a hollow, desperate fear. There are detectives here. They're talking about $3,600,000 in forgery. Please, tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave us permission. The power flip was complete. The woman who had thrown my grandmother's legacy into the trash was now begging me to save hers. I leaned into the microphone, my voice as cold as the San Francisco fog outside. I didn't do anything, Katherine, I said quietly. I just read the fine print. My mother's voice broke through, shrill with panic. Olivia, honey, I'm your mother. You can't do this to us. Think about the family reputation. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for 33 years, and I was finally calling in the debt. The reputation you're worried about was built on the theft of a dying woman's peace, I replied. The audit is finished, Mum. The balance is zero. I ended the call and looked at the director. Richardson looked at me with a new kind of respect, the kind people give to something they finally realized is dangerous. What happens now? He asked. Now, I said, gathering my grandmother's original ledger, justice takes its natural course. The legal fallout was as swift and clinical as a forensic audit. Katherine's viral notoriety became her prison before she ever stepped foot in a cell. The same followers who liked her reimagining of the estate were the first to tear her down in the comments, once the criminal charges were public. She was sentenced to 4 years in state prison for felony forgery and attempted insurance fraud. Our mother, Patricia, received 2 years for her willful blindness and complicity in the theft. They were forced to sell the family home, to pay the restitution and legal fees. They moved into a small apartment in a part of the city Katherine would have never tagged on a map, living a life that was finally as boring as they once claimed mine was. I used the $3,600,000 inheritance to establish the Laura Legacy Library for Discarded Histories. We don't just store books. We help people find the truths their families tried to bury. We catch the discrepancies. We read the fine print for the elderly and the overlooked, who are too tired to do it themselves. Every morning, I walk into that building and see Grandmother Laura's original ledger on a velvet display in the center of the hall. It is a permanent reminder that even when you are thrown in the trash, you still have value. To those of you listening who have ever felt like the invisible child, the one who sits in the back of the room while someone else takes the spotlight, I want you to know something. Being quiet is not a weakness. It is an observation period. You are not boring or difficult. You are the one who sees the patterns everyone else is too loud to notice. The truth does not need to scream to be heard. It just needs someone with the patience and the precision to find it. I sit on my balcony now, watching the San Francisco mist lift over the harbor, and for the first time, it feels like freedom. I do not check their social media. I do not wait for apologies that would just be more noise on a balanced ledger. The case is resolved. I opened Grandmother's old ledger one last time, stared at the numbers, and felt a stillness I had not known in 33 years. No guilt, no noise, just the truth. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to know that being the quiet one is their greatest strength. Don't forget to subscribe for more journeys toward truth and justice.